Chief Cindy Woodhouse Nepinak joins me now from our Ottawa studio. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having us.
Well, I know that you started your term back in December. How would you characterize your first couple of weeks here on the job?
It's been very busy. It's been busy every day. First Nations have no shortage of issues, and we need to make sure that our voices are heard and that we're not forgotten in Ottawa and across the country.
Talk to me a bit about your priorities as chief and what they are and will continue to be.
Well, policing is an essential service. I think that's one that I've been elected on, and when I ran in the election in December, it was a children's agenda. It was focused on our children, which included, of course, education, making sure that Canada recognizes our rights, and, of course, on child welfare, trying to find a different way forward for us with that issue in this country. It's such a tough issue, as well as housing and infrastructure and influencing the next federal budget. I think that's the role of the National Chief, is to make sure that, there's a budget coming down at the end of March, and to make sure that First Nations are not left out of that budget. It's disheartening when we see the fall economic statement, for instance, and there wasn't very much reference to First Nations in that. And, as National Chief, we want to make sure that that the budget reflects that First Nations are in this country, that we're not forgotten, and that our issues are at the forefront. There's major gaps in this country, and I know that there's a commitment from this government to close the infrastructure and housing gap to 2030, and we'd like to hold them to that. So
tell me some specifics that you would like to see in that budget.
Oh, absolutely. There's some education funding that's setting in March for $340 million that supports 7,900 First Nations kids who go to, and young people who are attending post-secondary education institutions. We'd like to, work towards getting that reinvested into the budget to make sure that our First Nations people are not left out of, our young people are given a hand up, and to make sure that their treaty rights are respected when it comes to education, but also making sure that, when there's healthy First Nations people, that's good for everybody, including, all of Canada.
You mentioned the settlement to compensate more than 300,000 children and families for the failures of unreserved child welfare services. I know that you were instrumental in that settlement. How would you like to see this $20 billion work to reform the system?
Certainly. I think that, we've finished now, $23 billion of it to compensate people, to compensate families, and to let them know that they've been wronged through the system. There's still, of course, $19.8 billion that's left on the table that we need to try and come to a final settlement agreement on across the country. There's a broken child welfare system in this country that leaves many kids, and especially as they age out, and you see them on the streets, and you wonder why, because they've been through a broken system, and they've been disconnected from our communities. That's a big issue in this country, and I think that if we can work together in a good way, put that back into the hands of First Nations, it will do, our kids will do better in years to come. But we have to fix that broken system.
I know that your predecessor didn't finish her term. Former Chief Roseanne Archibald was voted out after, their complaints about her leadership. This was a pretty chaotic time and a divisive time for the AFN. You're coming into this position now. How are you going to unify the AFN, and has that work started already?
I think it started, I think when we focus on our kids, when we focus on trying to get results for our kids, we shouldn't have any time to bicker or be argumentative. Although I was talking to Jagmeet Singh today, and I said to him, I have to say this about First Nations, even though sometimes maybe we have differing views, like all Canadians do. Mm-hmm. The House of Commons can be a very divided place many times. And I have to say that First Nations are more united than the House of Commons.
You think so? Yeah.
I think so.
And so talk to me about specifically what you're going to do within the AFN to ensure that kind of is a pillar. While there's, conversations and disagreement, it's also there's a unified front.
Well, there is differing views. I mean, when it comes to gaming, for instance, right. I know that there's a debate right now, and I know that, there's always discussions on how to move the agenda forward. But I think if we keep to getting results for our young people, like education, like child welfare, I think that we'll be united in many of those issues. There are, of course, differing views and sticking points from time to time, but for the most part, there's lots of common issues that we stick to. And I think as the new leader, I think as the new national chief, sticking to those common issues and sticking to those issues that we can find consensus on to build momentum, to get results, sticking to those issues will be helpful. Because it is a short term, it's only 3 years, and I'm not going to be able to finish everything, but at the same time, if we can stick towards getting results in a good way, in a united way, I think that will help bring us together once again, just as my grandfather and the people that came before me had wanted. And we need to continue to have those conversations. They're not always going to be easy, but they're necessary.
You mentioned that you met with Jagmeet Singh today, the leader of the NDP. Have you met with all the federal leaders?
I have, yeah. I've talked to all of them. Actually, I have not met with the Bloc Québécois, and I know I've met with the Green Party prior to my election, but I'd like to get to the table with all of them. I have met with the NDP, the Conservatives, and the Liberals.
And how did those conversations go? Why don't we start with the Conservatives, and then we can go to the Liberals?
Well, absolutely. I met with Pierre yesterday, and I know that we had talked about economics and the economics of First Nations people. I know that he's committed to giving us a draft of some of his thoughts on economic development and economics for First Nations people. So I look forward to those conversations with him moving ahead. The NDP, we had met today. We had talked about his support towards education, some of our budget asks. So there's lots going on, lots to discuss, absolutely.
And on the Prime Minister, the previous chief had labeled the Prime Minister, quote, a performative reconciliationist. What do you make of that comment? And what's your hope for the future of the AFN and your relationship with this government, particularly the Prime Minister?
Oh, absolutely. Look, we're going to be continuing to meet with him and his ministers on a daily basis. I mean, we met again yesterday with the Attorney General. Tomorrow we're meeting Chrystia Freeland. We're trying our best to influence change, to influence the budget-making process, to make sure that there's investments going into First Nations, to closing the huge gaps that exist for First Nations. We have to work with any government, no matter who it is. But at the same time, we try our best. I have to uplift the Prime Minister, though, for the $40 billion that he did invest into, child welfare. I know that it was either go back to court or put the money in and get that done. So I do lift him up for that.
So do you disagree then with the previous chief's characterization?
Look, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. I do see that reconciliation is maybe wavering a little bit in this country, and we need it to be at the forefront a lot more. I know that being new to this role, I know that I need to get briefed up a little bit more on that, but at the same time, when it comes to reconciliation, that is at the forefront, and it has been wavering for maybe a year now, and I think that we need to get back to the table to get some of this work done, even on economic reconciliation, for instance.
You've also called for a public apology from the Prime Minister and the federal government on historical and systemic injustices. Why do you think that is so important, and do you think you'll get one?
Well, I want to hope that we'll get one. I know that, when it was the apology, for instance, with Stephen Harper's government on residential schools, I think that was a big turning point for our residential school survivors and their families to know that they've been wronged. And through the child welfare system and through, of course, kids that were discriminated even through, like medically, on reserve, that weren't provided proper care, that it's also recognized that they've been wronged as well. And as we bring families back together once again, as we try and stop the bleeding that exists in the child welfare system, that this country apologizes for the way that it's handled our people and the way that it's pushed us down. And it's been tough. We've had residential schools, day schools, a 60 scoop, and now all of us have inherited the child welfare system.
Yeah, I know that you're going to be traveling to the community where there was the worst mass stabbing in Canada. Tell me what you're going to talk to people in that community about.
That's a tough issue. It's my condolences to the community. My condolences to the families. I'm glad that the inquiry happened. I'm glad that there's things that we could have learned from that. And now moving ahead as National Chief, all we can call for is that policing is made as an essential service for First Nations. And we keep hearing many more reasons why and why we should, the reasons why not to is behind us now. And the reasons why we should, it needs to be worked on together. Of course, with the provinces, with the feds, and with First Nations at the table equally together to find a way forward.
It's clearly emotional for you. What has it been like for you to talk to some of these families, as I know you've done already?
Well, knowing them, right?
Yeah.
Really knowing them, knowing some of these families and knowing how they must feel, it hurts my heart. I mean, I'm a mother, first and foremost. I can't imagine, and of course I'm a sister, and I have a big family on my First Nation as well, so I can't imagine what that family and that community is going through. And the families, that it's been wide implications on that, on people's emotions. And now we have to find a way how to prevent these things from happening, and to make sure that people get the support that they need ahead of time, to make sure that policing is a priority for First Nations, that we're not left out, that delays don't happen, and it happens time and time again. It's such a big issue to talk about.
I want to talk about another big issue right now in Manitoba, and that is the search of that landfill. And I know that, the new premier, he promised when he was campaigning that this was going to happen. Are you concerned that this could once again become politically fraught and become tied up in issues of money and resources?
Well, I certainly hope not. I think this, first of all, I want to say again my condolences to the families of those women that are still lying in the dump. And it's so, I wish we weren't having this conversation, but it is there, and it's in front of us now, and it's something that we have to deal with. And money shouldn't be the issue on it. It needs to be focused on the families. And I think that it shouldn't have become a political issue. It shouldn't have become a campaign issue in Manitoba. I know I'm from Manitoba, and it was tough to see those flyers come in my mailbox every week, targeting women, voiceless women who had no voices. We do have a new premier there. I'm very proud to see a First Nations premier. I never ever thought in the history of my lifetime that I would see a First Nations premier, and I uplift him in a good way, Mr. Wabkanu. And I know that he has to work with the families to find resolve to this, and the federal government can't leave them at the table by themselves. And I know that Grand Chief Cathy Merrick is also at the table there, trying to find resolve to all of this, and I wish them well. And I'll be there as National Chief to try and help in any way that I can, and I think that there's very capable people here trying to work through this.
You talked about Wabkanu breaking down barriers. You're doing that yourself as the youngest woman, first mother to hold this position. A lot of people say being a mom is the toughest job in the world. What are you going to take from that experience, being a mom, to this position?
Being a mother is first and foremost who I am, but every day that we do something better to make, I think all of us as Canadians, we want to get up in the morning and make sure, and First Nations people, we get up in the morning and want to make sure that our kids have a better life than we did. I had to go to day school. I hope my kids never have to. In fact, I'll make sure that they never have to go to day school. And those were tough days, but at the same time, every day I look at them and I think we have to protect their rights and remind them that they do have rights in this country, and push back on policies that push against us. For instance, membership. The federal government needs to get out of the way of telling us who we are as members. I think every time we have children, we know who our children are, and we know who our people are. The only people that they ever try and tell who they are is First Nations people. And I think that I'd like to have that conversation with the federal government on membership, and putting back the membership back to First Nations to identify for ourselves who we are. So as a mother, I think that's a big issue for me.
A lot of conversations to have, a lot of work ahead of you. Chief, certainly appreciate the time coming here on Canada Tonight this evening.